So let me introduce my colleague, JJ Laukaitis, who will be emceeing and moderating this panel. JJ will wait to come up until the kerfuffle about chairs is done. But you are in very capable hands, and he will introduce the panelists and take you through the discussion.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is JJ Laukaitis. I'm a program director here at the Industrial Liaison Program as well. And I'm here to moderate a panel on labor force disruption, which is a great timing to follow Ben Armstrong's talk and data and questions with us. So we're really lucky to have some great panelists for you today. And I'll introduce them in a second, but we're going to talk about industry issues, specific ones like Ben was alluding to, and rolling up at a national level. We're going to get really into some specific problems and hear from industry about those. And then we have academic researchers here as well, and they're going to talk about their research and their insights that they see with those problems. And then we're going to have a discussion, and hopefully this leads to some ideas and solutions that you can use. Labor force disruption is something I think we're seeing in all sectors. So with that, let me introduce the panelists to you. First is Ben Armstrong, that you just heard from. I'll reintroduce his role and title to you. He's the Interim Executive Director and Research Scientist at the MIT Industrial Performance Center. And his research and teaching examines how workers, firms, and regions adapt to technological change. So his current projects include a national plan for U.S. manufacturing workforce in partnership with the DoD, Department of Defense, as well as regional playbooks and developing lessons for struggling regional economies of the U.S. So Ben, welcome. Also, we have Professor Tom Kochan from MIT, and he's the post-tenure George Maverick Bunker Professor at the MIT Sloan School of Management.
Good to see you.
And he's a faculty member in the MIT Institute for Work and Employment Research. And Professor Kochan focuses on the need to update America's work and employment policies, institutions, and practices to catch up with the changing workforce and economy. And his recent work includes, or calls attention to the need for a new social contract at work, one that anticipates and engages current and future technological change in ways that build a more inclusive economy and broad shared prosperity. And also our two industry panelists here, Dwayne Groutman from Xylem Incorporated. They're a global manufacturer of water pumps, sensors, and smart meters, and provider of water treatment technologies. And Dwayne is a vice president of global operations and supply chain management. And responsible for design and execution of end-to-end supply chain for a $1 billion business, and includes managing such activities as the entire manufacturing in the U.S. and abroad, finding and retaining talent, adopting new technologies, and workforce upskilling as the product technologies change, all while getting hard goods out the door for a publicly held company that has to report quarterly earnings. So welcome, Dwayne. And finally, Mike McDonald is a vice president and chief technology and innovation officer at Amstead Rail, which is part of global diversified manufacturer Amstead Industries. And Amstead Rail builds everything from wheels, axles, bearings, and brake systems, bogies, bolsters, and more things for rail. It also provides customers with components, integrated systems, global tracking technology, and performance analytics. Mike is responsible for all technology aspects, including people development, global technology strategy, business enablement and resiliency, and in his role as Chief Innovation Officer for Amstead Rail, Mike's responsible for developing a grassroots innovation program into a core competency within all aspects of the company. So welcome, Mike. Okay, I'll take a seat here. I'm going to start, by really drawing out the industry guests and their direct experiences as they went through the pandemic and to talk about those things. And then I want to bring in Tom and Ben to talk about their research and how that looks to them in these examples, and then we'll see what insights we can draw and discuss. And then we'll take some questions from the audience, both in person and remote, and using the same Pigeonhole application as we used in Ben's session. So Dwayne, I'm going to start with you.
All right.
You first tell us a little bit about the context of Xylem and what you do and all that, and the scale But also, when the COVID-19 crisis hit in early 2020, what were the impact to Xylem's manufacturing and operations, and what direct labor actions did you have to take? So I'd like to just hear how you had to fare with those.
So Xylem is total about a $5 billion company. We really focus on end-to-end solutions for the water industry and utility support. So anywhere from pumping, treatment, wastewater treatment, return. I work in the metrology division, so we do the residential and commercial metrology and the smart city networks that go along with that in my business unit. You know, the impact in 2020, you know, I'm going to focus on the U.S. business, I think, for this, right? So we saw, you know, 20 to 25% order reduction, you know, pretty early in 2020. The company thankfully I work for a great company, and we saw that this was a temporary problem, right, early, and we hoped it was very temporary, obviously much longer than what it was. But there was a heavy concern if we reduce our workforce to match the decline in orders that we were going to have severe problems on the rebound on the other side. So the actions we really took were primarily focused on temporary workforce and if we had any reductions. The company we put a employment assistance program in place, so if they were impacted by COVID, if they had to go out with an active case or even a quarantine, we provided pay to try to retain the employees, and it was very successful in 2020. On the rebound side, though, the orders came back not at 25%, they came back at 50 to 60 to 70% increase over where we were even in 2019. And so we've been in a constant struggle to find employees and labor to rebound at that level. And also now the supply chain shortages are amplifying the issue.
Right.
But it's been a real challenge to find the workforce in the 2021 environment. And we've seen factories where we need a 20 to 30% increase, and over a year period we've seen a net of 1%. Between the attrition that we have in addition to the hiring. So successful hiring of about 15%, but we've lost 12.
Wow.
You know, in the same time frame. And it's a lot of the factors that I think that Ben mentioned, right? And a heavy competition in the area. We do exit interviews with every employee that goes and try to find out their reasons. A lot of it early retirement, child care problems, better wages somewhere else. Like it's the standard MO. So really, you know, here looking for creative ideas and solutions to help through those problems. So
great. Well, that sounds like a real whipsaw, and with hard goods. It's not like you're selling consumer goods that people are buying off Amazon. These are infrastructure kind of projects where you wouldn't expect whipsawing of orders so much.
No, the heavy whipsawing, and we're in the transition from a traditionally mechanical type product to adding technology onto those products, and it's a very unique conversion, and the skill set required is very different, obviously, from the traditional factory. So,
okay, Mike, tell us about Amstead Rail, its manufacturing and operations context, how it went through the COVID situation, but also weave into that what you've told me about some of the innovative programs for employees that Amstead Rail has launched and is part of the culture.
Yeah, so first of all, there's, I think, 3 questions there, so we'll work through them. Amstead is a ESOP, which is employee ownership. So that's a really important and unique structure where our US-based employees have equity in the company. And that's on top of a traditional 401k, so it's really a unique value proposition for our employees. So we tend to get very tenured employees that stay around, and that certainly helped us through the pandemic and just the job challenges out there. And then I think some of the things that we've done in technology actually started in 2019 before the pandemic, where technology jobs some of them were 1.9% unemployment. So it forced us to look at tech jobs differently. And we started to look at secondary spigots, creative things, like there's a program out of Chicago we're real proud to be part of. It's called Inner City Kids, Inner City Stars. It's taking high school students and putting them through a 14 to 16 week technology program, and then helps to place them. And we not only are participating in that, but we're helping try to stand up a chapter in Kansas City as well, so we're proud to be part of that. Things like the Mom Project, where you take, there's a program called the Mom Project, where moms who have stayed home with kids are wanting to work 15, 20 hours a week, very talented skill set, so we started to use that program as well. And we opened a technology center in Canada as well, a services center that just found another spigot of talent. And so we were looking at these things in technology before the pandemic, And certainly our manufacturing operations are looking for secondary spigots in trade schools and secondary programs as well.
Wow. So that's a real advantage to have those programs going on when this set in.
For sure, it was very beneficial.
Okay. Okay. So I want to bring in Ben and Tom on this, right? So, Tom, so you've got deep experience and research focus on labor representation and the social contract between workers and employers. How has the pandemic changed this relationship? And is it a permanent change? Does anything that Dwayne and Mike said just now surprise you, or does it emphasize some of the things that you're also hearing?
Well, thanks, JJ. And Dwayne and Mike just set up a really good conversation on a set of issues we're all struggling with. And the short answer to your last question is that it not only amplified the pressures for a new social contract, it's really launched it in ways that only events can do, rather than those of us who say that it ought to happen. And what we just heard in terms of the shortages and in terms of the responses, I think is really paving the way for a new social contract. Clearly, the increased demand that you experienced, Dwayne, is going to continue, especially in the work that you do, as we get more and more into rebuilding our infrastructure.
Absolutely.
So there's a tremendous market out there.
Right.
There's going to be tremendous need for more people with the right sets of skills who are motivated to stay with the organization. And that challenge has been faced by all organizations. And Mike, I was delighted to hear how you're reaching out to some, I'll say, unconventional sources of labor supply and working with community groups who are out there and willing to work. There are so many nonprofits like the ones you mentioned. Some call themselves worker centers, some call themselves other things. There's the Mom Project and so on. But building partnerships with those institutions that feed into our community colleges that Ben knows so well, and into our other sources of education, including us reaching out and doing our job at universities to help reskill, upskill, and provide online and other tools for the employees that you need. That's part of the new social contract. And when JJ, when you mentioned the worker voice, I've been a student of worker voice, both the traditional collective bargaining and so on, and other forms that are emerging all around the country. And it's an enormous amount of energy, pent-up energy that is exploding. And it's not exploding necessarily in an adversarial way. It's exploding and saying, we want a voice in how we come back to work. We want a voice in how we're going to meet these challenges. We are prepared to work on issues of the mission of the organization, the operational challenges you face on the shop floor, and we want fair treatment and we want respect. And we want to have a voice. And whether that comes through a traditional union collective bargaining, or it comes through an ESOP arrangement or a joint committee, some of this is questionable under our labor law, but nobody really seems to worry too much about setting up a council that has real influence and builds peer support, helps to provide training, helps to provide operational support, helps to provide people who are struggling with their family situations. That's the kind of new social contract that I see emerging in best companies, and I heard a little from you, Mike, is happening. So I think it's exciting. Now, we can't let this potential historic and transformational moment be lost on us. We got to learn from it. We got to build to the future. We've got tremendous issues of inequality. We got tremendous frustration in the workforce because they haven't had the kind of opportunities for growth and for advancement for decades in some cases. And we've got excluded groups who are now being brought in and part of a more inclusive workforce. Those are the advantages that we have and the opportunities we have right in front of us, and I see them playing out in your organization. So I'm excited about it. Now, obviously, we've got an awful situation in the world. That's going to add more tension to all of us in our daily lives, in our work lives. We got to be sensitive to that. We may be on the brink, I hate to say this, of a wartime economy where we all have to pull together, and that means listening to the workforce and engaging in labor management cooperation in ways that we don't always do in, quote, normal times. But I think that's where we are today, and I spend just about every minute of my day trying to get the different parties to say, let's work together on these big, big challenges we face and some of these awful uncertainties we face right now, because it's a historic opportunity.
Okay, great. Ben, hearing Mike and Dwayne's experiences and the challenges they face and some of the unique steps they're taking, the impact COVID's had, how does this sound to you? Is this representative of some of the things that you've seen in your research and casework? That's one question. And the second question is, with Amstead Rail and their ESOP structure, how common is that? And is that something that you think has more upside for other firms to emulate?
Well, thanks. I was very interested to hear both of the examples. Can I ask a question, if you don't mind, for Xylem? You mentioned that the skills that you're looking for now, as your business is shifting from a mechanical to a more technical focus, it's new. Does that mean that you're recruiting in different ways? Can you say more about how those skills are changing? Because I wonder if that makes it easier or harder, you think, to have a more technically oriented workforce.
I would say our recruiting has not adjusted to the skill change, and that's part of the issue, I think. And we use a lot of traditional methods. Prior to most of our factories, we use temporary as a gateway to enter. We basically cut that completely off, right? So it was really just bring somebody in the door and develop. The advancement of the technology, as we adapt and we put smart technology on a legacy mechanical product, right? The people that can mechanically do it's fine, right? But just being able to troubleshoot problems, technicians, and that type of work has really, really been a challenge to find. And we've introduced a lot of robotics, to your point. I mean, not nearly to the level we need to be, but to find the skills to actually work on those machines, keep them operational, the maintenance technicians, that type of worker we've had a really, really difficult time finding. So we're always trying to find that balance between the two. And unfortunately, the electronics, the circuit board industry, for the most part, that technology left the country. That's where I started. But for the most part, it doesn't exist. There's not a lot of PCBA manufacturing in the U.S., right? We contract manufacture all of it. You bring them in. If there's a problem, who fixes it, who can work on it is really, really unique and challenging for sure. So
that's something that seems common and that you share with your peers. But in terms of technological advancement or workforce challenges, it seems like both of the companies, at least compared to the ones I know and talk to, are at the leading edge of investing resources in recruitment and partnerships to solve the problem, and also are more technologically advanced, it seems like, than the median company as well.
yeah.
So coming out now of COVID, so to speak, reaching some semblance of normalcy with a lot of asterisks on that, has this experience caused Xylem to change some of its strategy in, let's say, siting plants or reshoring? Or I think as you were talking, what skill sets and what people you attract and retain and upskill?
Yeah, I think that definitely on our side, the past few years, we were heavily involved, obviously, in the trade issues, right, but prior to the pandemic with China. So a lot of reshoring and more localization was happening prior to that. Obviously, now with the Buy America Act coming through, and we're a part of the infrastructure side of things for sure, right? Yeah. So we're seeing more and more demand to migrate back towards a U.S.-based manufacturing strategy. And so we have a lot of our product, probably 40% of our product is coming in from offshore, either Europe or Mexico. And so we see a lot of challenges. So I'm having struggles right now with the work that stayed and never left, and now trying to add into bringing more back in. We're highly concerned. But
so it makes the workforce problem even more extreme.
Absolutely. This is going to amplify for us, over the next year or two. So, yeah.
And for you, Mike, did this COVID experience, it validated some of the programs you already had in place and some of those alternative pipelines for talent you had in place? Did it help you think of new ones, or or increase the investment in those programs?
So a couple things on that. I think one of the things we found out real quick is that we were in the midst of modernizing our HR systems for onboarding and recruiting. And that was probably timely that we were doing that, because certainly we need to move at a different pace and be more nimble in this job market. So we're happy to have those systems in place. And then I think, just being fast and nimble in recruiting people. We don't want to give up our principles and background and doing our research on people, but we also have to do that quick and nimble. And that's probably the lesson learned here. It's kind of like the housing market right now, where you are, a lot of people are taking things without inspection and really the due diligence you would do in a normal housing market. So how do you do that due diligence but still be fast and nimble in the job market in the U.S.?
That's an interesting challenge.
Right.
And a great analogy with the housing market.
Right. Well, and then I think these secondary spigots really, for talent, have really paid off, and we probably went further faster with them than we would have with no pandemic.
Right. And that's kind of an example of what Ben was talking about, these organic methods employers in Northeast Ohio are doing to try to do things together to find people to fill the industry gaps. But you're doing it totally in your own company.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
That's a hard thing to do for everybody. So Tom, one of the things I wanted to ask you, you teach a course, and it's now available in online form, on shaping the work of the future. And it has an emphasis on employees now planning their own career paths. And with the pandemic and a lot of people taking online training like this, what sort of feedback are you getting from the students who take that course in terms of how they're approaching their career paths and working with employers?
Well, the first thing is that the pandemic offered more people opportunities to take courses like this, and I joke about that, but that is an opportunity. We're seeing that not only in uptake in online courses like the one that JJ mentioned, but also in companies. We've been working with IBM, it's not a secret, and they have seen and they have a platform of learning that is available to the employees. The employees can do it on their own time, and they can do it, pick courses from a whole variety of resources, some in-house, some from MITx and Coursera and others and other places. And they've seen a great increase in the amount of training and learning time that people are putting into it, because they have a little bit more flexibility to do it on their own, and it's at home and it's online and so on. So I think there's an enormous opportunity to use these tools, because employees themselves are saying, we want to change our skill mix. We see the world of technology changing just as you do. And we know that in order for me to be competitive in my occupation next year, I'm here, and here are some changing technologies. I need a path to get there. And so offering those opportunities, we're hearing more and more people saying, I'm willing to do this, when in the past, I can wait till retirement. It's not going to affect me. It's, there are all kinds of excuses. I don't have the time. There's more openness to this. That opens up the opportunity now for us to create the avenues for training and learning. And I noticed there was a question posed here for us about skills and about training. And it's training of it's learning of a different sort that I think we have to recognize people want today. Yes, they want training if there's a new piece of technology, a new tool coming in. How do I use that? But that goes without saying. Today, more people, particularly young people, recognize it's a suite of changes in technology and how we work with it. And we want to be able to have broader training so we're ahead of this technology before it hits me at my workplace, so that I can really work with it, and then I can help improve it. And the best vendors and the best companies are engaging the workforce now before the technology comes, so that they can help inform how it will change the way in which we work, and I will be ready for it. And by the way, I've got some ideas on what to put on this interface that will make this technology really more productive, and I'll find new innovations for it. That's the frontier. So it's engaging the employees, letting them learn about the broader scope of technologies that are coming, and then letting them help the company to shape those in ways that really drive innovation and productivity. That's where we need to go, and that's where a lot of employees want to go, and that's where a lot of good companies are going.
Okay, Ben, at a national level and at a government policy level, so we've heard ideas about, like the German model of apprenticeship, working with industry and government. Is there any momentum or buzz of something like that happening in the U.S.?
There are certainly boosters of a German or Swiss model, even boosters in the federal government of this kind of model. And when the Secretary of Commerce was in Rhode Island, she was certainly exploring, as governor, different ways of alternative approaches to training. I think we are foolish to think that we could just import something like a German apprenticeship model into the United States. We just don't have the components, the ingredients to make that work. Strong, organized labor, government that's willing to convene, strong industry associations that can set curricula, just don't happen right now. So something that's a more of a grassroots approach to apprenticeship. I mean, South Carolina has a state program. I think it's still unclear how that might work without BMW, for example, which was the real anchor for the growth of that program. But I do think that grassroots approaches that defray some of the cost and the risk of companies doing internal training could be really helpful. Because I think that the big problems, at least, and I think this might be concentrated in the SMEs, I'm not sure if you experience this as a larger company, is internal training, on-the-job training. The costs are so high, and these companies aren't expert at training. They don't really have the training infrastructure. So I think a lot of companies are looking to offload some of those costs. They just can't really trust third-party institutions to do the training right now. And a little bit of shared costs might be an option. I think that I saw one of the questions about apprenticeship programs in trade schools. One of the things that I worked in software before coming to, or in kind of the software Silicon Valley world before coming to MIT. And one of the more exciting things for people to do from all career paths was to go to a boot camp to learn how to code. And it's still very popular. And the idea was you could promise a career path with somewhat minimal training of somewhat standardized skills to have an on-ramp to an exciting career where you're making something, you're not just doing whatever previous job folks were doing who went to these boot camps. I tried to study these boot camps of were they really promising the right things or could they deliver on the career path goals? And a lot of these boot camps did have excellent outcomes for the workers who were totally changing career paths, learning something entirely new and pretty complicated in coding in Ruby or Python. And I think there could be something similar. I've talked to a technology company in manufacturing technology that they'd love to do the same thing for robotics, to have robotics technicians who could learn the programming language, learn how to troubleshoot, help various companies in a shorter course, not in the traditional education system, which is a bit too brittle. It has a bit too much difficulty of adjusting to these new technologies. And I think that model is exciting. It's very different. I imagine some companies could start, Google's tried with an experiment on data certification. But in manufacturing, we haven't really seen those shorter, more concentrated courses that promise some type of career on-ramp. Given the way wages are going for some larger manufacturing companies, it might be worth it because these look like really promising careers again.
Okay. I want to take some questions from the audience on the Pigeon, and we've touched upon some of these issues. So one though, I did want to bring up, there was a question about childcare. And it's a huge issue for people in the workforce, availability and cost. Also, it's a factor in the whole equation of working from home versus going into the office. We talked about this, Dwayne, yesterday, because we walked through campus and we saw one of the on-site daycares here on campus. And I know you said your company's thinking of, do we need to offer that kind of thing? I'd like to hear more about how do you see childcare as a benefit? Is that a key issue for people you're trying to bring in?
Yeah, I think, especially when I look at a 24/7 operation, right? And we've had facilities where we've gone to like a 12-hour, 2 on, 2 off, 12-hour shift at night the night shifts have been a nightmare to recruit for. And a lot of it is almost always a response around childcare. It's extremely difficult to work a 12-hour shift overnight, right? And so yeah, we posted the idea of do we put an on-site childcare and bring it in? There were a lot of concerns, obviously, around the liabilities.
Yeah.
And the factory we were looking at is a 150-year-old factory. The campus is not well designed for children by any means. And so it's one of the ideas, but we talked about it yesterday, going through and seeing one of your lab in one of your areas where you have a lot of the students are coming in and they have children. I'm like, I think it's a great idea to take that off the table, and also you could help share the cost with the employee at that point, and obviously probably offers a deal that they will not find anywhere else in the community, right? And so I still think it's a great idea. I think that physically getting it in motion, finding the right people to actually work and having the certifications, right? A lot of responsibility you have to take on. But I think it's a strong play to help with that issue.
I would just add to that this is the logical area for businesses to work together, because it's very difficult to handle liability questions and skills in terms of the staffing a child care center facility by facility or company by company. But in our communities, getting companies to work together to have centers close to work or somewhere strategically located that transportation works for the employees and for the company is a logical solution. And it's a little bit of Ben's point as well. We've got to start to work more together, both across companies and across the workforce and companies. So I think there are some collective solutions to the child care crisis that could be explored if we had the leadership from business and others to work together.
Another topic in the questions list related is pensions. How does a pension come into play? Seems like most companies no longer offer one. So looking at the social contract compared to the contracts of before, it looks like it's gotten worse, obviously, that in the social contract. And how do you see, who wants to talk about pension in this? And Mike, I also want to ask you about that, because within ESOP, you're different from that. Your employees may be less sensitive to this issue than that. Did you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, I would just say that with the ESOP structure, and just for people who don't know what an ESOP is, it's equity in the company for all U.S. employees. And some of the biggest companies out there, Publix, grocery stores, Burns & McDonnell Engineering, Black & Veatch, and many of these companies are ESOPs. And it really does create a unique opportunity for employee value. Pensions, in most cases, have gone away years ago, and this is a way to share in the wealth of the company for our employees.
Yep. Great. Tom, how do you see the pension question with the social contract?
Well, it's a real problem, because we did have defined benefit pensions, and in public sector, government still has those, but they've gone away mostly in the private sector. The 401ks that have been put in place don't have the same replacement value of the defined benefit pension plan, but they have the advantage that they are portable, and the money goes, follows the person. And so I think we have to double down on funding the 401ks in ways that provide for an adequate retirement savings plan. And I think that's the direction. As much as some would like to go back to the defined benefit plan, people move around too much today, and that was a system that worked well when you had a very stable workforce, long-term employees. So as much as I'm a critic of the 401k program, because they are good but underfunded in terms of the benefits that they provide, we've got to expand them. And I'm all for seeing more of the kind of arrangements with ESOPs. Now, ESOP is a great institution, a great organizational model. It does encourage longer-term employment than otherwise, because it is linked into profit sharing. And so there's some things to learn from that as well, that it's not just the pension plan, it's the total compensation package And if one can create some incentives to stay with the firm, but like, we're going to share in the profits, and you're going to have some voice in this organization because of the ESOP, then I think we will be on a better track to recoup some of the retirement savings that we have lost, because we've got a generation, 2 generations now, that are going to reach the quote normal retirement age without the resources to be able to retire. And so we just have to get more dollars into those plans, or into some savings plan like a profit sharing or something like that.
Sounds like a good thought going forward. Looks like with the time we have left, the question that gets the most votes out there is a topic we've talked about in several ways here, but let's spend our time on this topic more. And the question itself is, how do we reinvigorate apprenticeship programs and trade schools in an educational system that has preached college as the only option? So we've touched upon this a little bit. Ben, I think this is really where you've researched this type of thing. What has to happen, do you think?
I don't have a good answer,
Right.
unfortunately.
It's a hard one to have an answer.
I don't know if apprenticeship programs or trade schools are reverting to, I talked about the 2 phases where there's the thriving equilibrium of up until the 80s, and then more of a kind of survival mode. Since then, I don't think the solution of how do we thrive again is let's bring back all the institutions of the 50s and 60s. I certainly don't think that's practical or desirable. I think that the main focus, this is mostly from an employer perspective, is how do I make investment in my people less risky? And there are a few risks there. One is, am I investing in the wrong skills? Am I going to actually need these skills with the next wave of technology that might be coming down? And then it also is, am I just going to lose this employee? Am I going to invest in someone who then goes and works for my competitor? So ways of reducing those risks, I think, would be really important from the employer side. From the employee side, right now, I think there needs to be more done to ensure that manufacturing careers are good, upwardly mobile careers. Mm-hmm. And some companies have really done this by emphasizing the different stages that an employee might be able to go from when they enter the company to when they're a senior, highly valued member of the team. So one thing that I've been working on with the state of Massachusetts as part of this program, they have a program called Mass Bridge, where they're trying to create a training pathway to middle skill career paths in manufacturing. And the assumption behind that program, I think it's a virtuous one, is that manufacturing careers are good careers. We need to get the word out. And I caution at that, because some manufacturing careers are good careers, to be sure, at some companies. But we also need to look at the conditions of the companies that are creating these good careers. And I think the easy way to think about it is, if you're coming out of high school into a manufacturing career, is there a path for you to make, in Massachusetts, 100K, 6 figures, over the course of your lifetime? And some companies can offer that, and other companies can't even come close. They don't really offer that upward mobility. It's like if you're going to go into a role, the machinist role is the highest you can get, and there's a clear cap for your role as a machinist. So from the company perspective, I think there's a strategy of how do we build those career paths. And from an employee perspective, I think it's helping either communicate those career paths or helping guide people. Here's how you get the training to have that somewhat well-compensated manufacturing career. It's also intellectually interesting. You work with your hands. You get to build something. There's a lot of reward, I think, to manufacturing careers beyond wages, but wages are pretty essential as well as a starting point.
And Ben, I would just add to that. I think the chart you had up earlier is hiring will and training skill. I think through these secondary or non-traditional programs, you can really hire the will and then spend time investing in the skill. I think that's an important element of this job market right now.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, and I think there's some reforms in the education community that are needed to, because I agree with Ben, we just can't go back and recreate the apprenticeship in the traditional model or in the German model, because we're not Germany. But we've got to have a more seamless process of moving from high school to maybe a technical school to the university to a lifelong learning system, because these skills are going to need to be refreshed. And We should no longer graduate people after 4 years of a university like ours or others around the country and say, thank you very much, just send us your money for the rest of your life. We should have opportunities for them to come back, refresh those skills, do a lifelong learning, and so should the trade schools and the technical schools. And that way we can have a more seamless process of allowing people to get the educational credentials and refresher skills when needed. And that's the model for education in the future. It would require more partnerships between the community colleges and technical schools and the universities. So we already have good models for that, but we need more of it. And then it requires the universities to think about their responsibility to their students as a lifelong responsibility, not just a degree and then please send us your donations for the rest of your life and after your life, for that matter.
Right. What are your thoughts on vocational technical programs, even in high schools? I mean, it's virtually disappeared, right, in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a good gateway, I felt.
Yeah, and Ben may have more to say about this than I do, but you know, it's becoming much, much more interesting to students now, because it is the state-of-the-art technologies, and they're all into this. You know, they're so facile with all sorts of social media and technology, so that they're more interested in that than taking another English course. So there's opportunity. I'm not arguing against that either, but I am suggesting that there's an opportunity to get some really, really good students interested in the technologies, and then link industry into those schools, both high schools, vocational schools, and universities, so that there's some on-the-job learning, and there's some classroom learning and on-the-job learning, and that really feeds on the system in a very positive way.
And just a quick response with the vocational high schools. Definitely, they still exist, I think, in smaller numbers, and some companies use them as a pipeline for hiring, particularly at these regional relationships. I think the challenge, and this goes back to the Ohio example, is that the highest performers from these vocational high schools might still even go to college. You know, and not that college isn't a bad thing. We're at a really lovely college right now. But the challenge is, will it ever be a rational decision for a high performer at a vocational school to go straight into manufacturing or to become that shop floor entrepreneur? I don't think that pathway is really well developed. It just makes so much more sense for them to get an engineering degree.
Absolutely.
And you know, I haven't really figured out for myself, you know, are there conditions under which you might advise that student, yeah, go work for the manufacturer and become a senior, a really valued person on the factory floor? From the manufacturer's perspective, that'd be amazing. But I don't know if you could ever counsel, right in the current economic environment, you never counsel a student to do that.
No. Agreed.
Okay, well, I think we'll leave the discussion there. I did want to point out, you know, there's some good resources here for our ILP members and others in the audience. If you want to learn more about what's going on in the Industrial Performance Center, please see their website for the different reports and publications that they put out. And also Professor Kochan's Institute for Work and Employment Relations Department. They have a lot of articles, reports, and courses that are available online on this subject. So with that, I'd like to thank our industry panelists for coming here today, sharing their topics and insights and challenges with us, and also Ben and Tom for their experiences that they're sharing with us. Hopefully we can help this move forward. So thank you.
Thank you.